I hope everyone had a fantastic festive season, with or without COVID.
So probably can't be a good season if it was with COVID.
Yeah. All yours.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Let me bring up my screen. Okay, everyone. Thanks for attending. Like Howard has said, today is about ArchiMate models, and I see this as a sort of a precursor to conceptual and then logical or physical data models. It's something that I've sort of used for a couple of years, but I want to make an early disclaimer that if there are any ArchiMate users here or any proper enterprise architects, you'll probably find that I am breaking a few rules when it comes to using the language, because I use it to kind of serve my purposes, and I'm not always strictly adhering to the ArchiMate meta model. Having said that, if you see anything here and you can point out some things to make it more effective to use, or let me know about the nuances of the language, I will be very happy to hear that. All right, so just for those who don't know me, I've got 2 kids, married, and I've got those dogs. We also call them apes because they just do what they want often. And I live in Cape Town, and I've been in the data management space for quite a while. I've got a programming background, technical background, so I sort of drifted from a more technical focus into design and architecture, and later specifically on the data management side. At the moment, I am principal consultant for Ultron, also a little bit involved in the pre-sale side. But my passion is really data, and I've been involved in a number of master data management projects specifically, and I think that's where I really sort of cut my teeth in the data world. Previously, I focused more on business process management and just software development. Surprisingly, I sort of got a real fresh appreciation for data modeling maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, when Howard and Craig and myself went to the US to attend one of Steve Herbermann's courses on data modeling. And although a lot of those concepts were not completely new, obviously the formats and the ERD and how they look like is familiar to everybody with data. But just using data models to successively talk about needs, a business need, and then a requirement, and then the solution, all of them using data models was just I developed a fresh appreciation for that. And so we're talking about data modeling today, but before I sort of used the normal ERD methods in a more business-focused way, I was sort of exposed to the ArchiMate language before that, and I retain just the importance of that medium to have structured thoughts on the one hand, but not completely something that bewilder a business user, or although that's the intent, and that's today what I want to talk about. All right, so I'll just be skipping over a few context slides before we get into it. What you see on the screen at the moment is just the way that we make sure that when we start an engagement, on any sort of data engagement, we want to talk about at least those things that you can see on the board or on the screen. And very importantly, just tying whatever we do from a data perspective back to business vision and business objectives is so important. It's a step we often miss. And especially when I was working for a few software vendors, big international companies, and at the time I was sort of on the development side and also design. But when I come into a project, it was often you're often sort of on the back foot because you're not quite sure what was promised by the sales team. It wasn't necessarily wrong what they said, but maybe they missed a few nuances, and it takes a while before you connect with the business and just actually realize what it is they actually need and how things can actually work and what the software that you're working with is capable of. And to sort of get away from the fact to be on the back foot on every project that I started, I sort of just developed this methodology, not me myself only, but in the process of doing the work and so on, collectively, there's a lot of people's ideas here. But we sort of came around and structure it in this way. And right now, before we do anything, we try to just put these things in context. Now, this can result in a light strategy, or it can result in a business case. But I just thought I'd put that here because it gives a bit of context before you go into just design mode. And you'll see like tools and technology and things like that are pushed to the back, so that the business vision and the governance styles and so on is really just in focus before you get there. So I'm just skipping through these. I just left these in for other purposes as well. But ArchiMate, maybe before we get there, ArchiMate, if you don't know, is a language. It's not a tool. I'm glad Simon Blume is here. Maybe Simon, an early sort of just quote-unquote warning. If you do want to jump in later a little bit and share how Erwin supports that, that'll be fantastic. But ArchiMate, the language, was developed more than a decade ago, and it's in its third iteration at the moment. And it's a language in the same way that UML is a language, right? There's certain objects and there's certain things that that means something. So what you're looking at, for example, now is anything that's purple. Color is important in ArchiMate language. Everything that's purple comes from what they call a motivational set of objects. These things are goals and drivers and objectives, and they all mean something. Now, we often use this to kind of just link what we learn and hear from customers to something real, so that successively you can take high-level constructs and eventually get to a solution. And although we do our thinking in the tool itself, using the language, this doesn't always go back to the client. I mean, you can see this is not necessarily a PowerPoint material. You can convey this kind of information in a much more prettier way. This, for example, is just a grouping of very high-level requirements that we were talking about. But the advantage of using ArchiMate for something like this is that you actually have it in a repository. You can link your requirements to objectives or other goals in ArchiMate language, to drivers, to principles, to specific artifacts, to solution components, to technology.
Sorry, Paul.
Yes.
Sorry, Melissa was asking a question. She did put her hand up and put it down, and there's a question in the chat box, and I'm not sure whether I fully understand it. She asked, which one supports BC? Melissa, have you...
Business case. So you had that kind of pyramid going down. I just wanted to know, you mentioned that some of those support the business case. I just wanted to know which ones they were. Obviously not the technologies, but vision. There was that slide. Yeah, that one. So I just want to know which ones support the business case.
Sure. What I meant was that in this structure, if you create a business case, you need to talk about these things, in your business case. You talk about the vision and the alignment. You want to have metrics in there, and especially in that block there, you would want to make sure that you present, that you tie your financial metrics to the other ones as well. My point was just that this content, you need to talk about this stuff, whatever you do, whether you need to create a strategy or shape it into a business case. These blocks are kind of, for me, it's giving me an excuse almost to talk to my customers about the right things. It doesn't have to be linear like that, to produce the output that's needed to make progress. Whether what's needed is a business case or a strategy or just a roadmap or something lighter or something heavier. If there are something heavier, then then for example here, we would perhaps insert a proper data maturity assessment, or there's, and Howard teaches on this as well, there's a much more really business aligned way to create a data strategy where, and I think Melissa, you've been in that class, you've probably heard it last week, is to just use the value streams and tie that to capabilities and eventually tie that back to data and really get a view. So that was my point there.
So basically, do you think all of those would be in the business case?
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Because, because it's more a matter of
maybe not tools and technology.
Yeah, maybe not, unless your business case is about tools and technology. If your business case is to actually implement a tool because there's already been research done, or you've already sort of traversed a path to get to a point of a decision, but you now need a business case to just put it through and get the financials aligned. You can be useful too.
Okay, thank you.
Howard, I see your hand is up.
Drew was asking a question.
Drew?
No, Howard, I saw you had your hand up. That's why I thought let's just check what it is.
So, yeah, I would like to get more detail, and I know you said it on Friday, and I think I was on 3G, so I didn't stop you. You say Archi is a language which is not the same as UML, which stands for the Unified Modeling Language, and UML certainly has the icons and the elements that go into any diagram or any model. So won't you explain exactly what you mean? Because UML claims to be a language.
Yeah, right. Okay, I missed your last sentence there, but
yeah, I mean just the acronym stands for Unified Modeling Language. So I think it claims to be a language, but you point out quite a few times that Archi's Archimate. Archi's the tool. Archimate's the language. What is the real difference that you have there?
Okay. Yeah. That's a good question. So Archimate itself is differentiated from. Let's talk about UML maybe, because I mean UML is obviously it's quite a sort of a big language. There's a lot you can do with it in a lot of different levels. Archimate is really geared towards an enterprise architecture level of thinking. So it doesn't allow you to go down too deeply into details. For example, where UML would allow you to have a class with properties, for example, and you can actually forward engineer that into code. Archimate would stop you from anything like that. You can't add an attribute to anything really. You only sort of work with the high level constructs like a role or an actor or a application or a business object or a product. They've got specific, and we'll go through a few of those. They've got specific symbols for what those things mean. And maybe I can actually switch very quickly to this. So if you look at the specification, it covers many things, but they're all on a sort of a high level. They cover strategy elements here, like for example a capability or a course of action. They have these things that's used for motivation, which is kind of why I link it back to our Articulate process, is that they've got specific objects for stakeholders, drivers, assessments, principles, and things like that. Then they've got the business layer, and all business layer things are yellow, for example, and you've got an actor and a role and a collaboration and a process and a function. And then on the application, all those things are blue. And so you've got applications as well, or an application component, but it's different from a business component. You've got an application interface, but it's different from a business interface, and things like that. So the point is that it's a language because it allows you to express things, and it definitely tries to keep you away from detail and try to keep you to stick with concepts and how things relate. Maybe that's a bit of a long-winded way to say a short thing.
So can I ask you a question? And that's, I suppose it's, every single time we model, I mean, especially in data modeling, we want to know all the way from the subject area to the physical implementation. So we have that impact assessment. Now, this is sort of stopping it, I wouldn't say halfway through, I wouldn't want to put a percentage, but I now battle to connect to my data model. So how do you overcome that, where if there's a change to the business architecture, I can see the effect on the subject area, the conceptual models?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me try to get there,
Okay.
and then if I'm not covering that well, then you can come back to
All right. Sorry about that.
No, 100%. All right, so I wanna jump a little bit ahead because we do want to talk about the actual data modeling, and I'm going to start here. So when we have a new project on the go, and a quick shout out to Len Silverstone, whose material and input I just really appreciate around party modeling and so on. But anyway, when we create a new project or we start an engagement, one of the things, especially if it's an MDM one, obviously, then one of the things we need to really get down is, okay, before we get into fancy abstracted party models and whatnot, we just need a way to speak to business about what are the main kind of parties involved. Now, right, typically we would spend a bit of time to just explain what the party concept is if they don't know. But I want to use this example where this is for a healthcare provider. So it's actually, I can tell you, it's MedScheme. They're an administrator, not a medical aid. But for them, we needed to just get a clear and concise way to figure out what kind of parties would we be dealing with. And Archimate was really helpful here because we said you read these things from the bottom. So we said, okay, a party can be either a person or organization. And nowadays it could be an IoT device, something like that. But all right, so we have this concept of a healthcare provider that they had in their business. Now already, I'm just going to pause there for a second. Already, they have a lot of other types of parties that is outside of healthcare provider, and there's another diagram that shows that. But just because the healthcare provider concept was muddled in their own minds, and they knew this, they kind of they wanted to use this modeling approach to unpack their own thoughts about how things actually should relate. So what we did for them is we said, okay, healthcare provider wise, you're going to have a few things under there. You're going to have a facility, which is an organization. And again, okay, so facility means something in Archimate, and facility means something else for the business. So that's just one thing you need to you need to be aware of the nuances when you use language like that. We did the same thing, for example, for Truist, where we wanted to talk about the facility, i.e. the building in which the store operates, but which is different from the store concept itself. And there was a bit of struggling to get the language right, because for so many people in the organization, facility means a specific thing, and it's not necessarily just the building in which a shop lives. So anyway, when there's sort of doubt like that, and this is also why I always keep the specification open, is it's always good to go to the I'm not be able to spell facility. If you want the standard definition for things, you can actually pull it from Archimate itself, and then just if people agree, then there's a nice definition for you, and we can put the thing to bed, right? So anyway, back to the party model here. So what we wanted to do is, okay, what roles would we need to cater for in our design? And specifically, let's just ignore everything else. What healthcare provider type of roles do we need to talk about? And this diagram is very helpful because we could immediately say, all right, this facility, it could either be a hospital or a mental health facility or a rehab. There's also a healthcare practice, which is also an organization, and it could be an individual practice, a group practice, or partnerships, and so forth, right? And Archimate was good here because it sort of separates, in this case, it separates the actors, persons and organizations that would be acting in the certain context of a role, like one of these, right? And then we used another Archimate construct called the collaboration to show what kind of relationships there might be between these roles. Okay, so these are the actual relationship that people can have. For example, there's just an association, i.e. an individual. Let's say there can be a family practitioner and he is associated with individual practice, say. Or, you know, there's a referral doctor and it will be a relationship between an actual specialist maybe and a hospital. Okay, so fair enough, this diagram doesn't show exactly which associations would be applicable between which parties, but that will come. You first just want to sort of get your mind out and stay on a level where you say, okay, well, this is my sort of playing field. This is my parameter from the thinking process. And that was really helpful, which is one example. So you'll see we're not designing solutions yet, but if you design a party MDM model, it takes a very long time, especially if you have to start to explain roles and things to your business user. I mean, even my eyes glaze over sometimes. You need something concrete to look at so that your design makes sense. And they don't always have to see the design and the technicalities behind it. It's not necessary. So, Rob, I
see there's a question from Robert Anderson about are those your dimensions starting to appear?
Sorry, man. I was just thinking, Paul, you know, this is almost the business trying to get it clear in their mind how they're going to kind of slice and dice their data, because until they're all talking about the same thing, you're kind of not going anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rob. It is certainly getting you to that point, right? It's helping. It's something that both you and the business can point at and get a common understanding, because this might not be the prettiest diagram, but it's not difficult to understand once I talk a little bit about it. And what happens then is, especially if I do this sort of live in front of a customer, it gets fun. I really love this part of the engagement, because they start to say, okay, well, look, you need to add something there into family org, because this is how we think of it. Or mental health facility doesn't actually belong here, you need to take it outside. Then you're in a sweet spot, you know, then you're making nice conversations, and you're getting to the level of conversation required for you to not make mistakes, design mistakes later on when you design the party model, for example. I'm just reading Graham's question quickly. At this level, you have business people and data technical guys trying to get a common language of the solution. Yes, that's correct. That's 100% correct. So what you're trying to do is just get a common, it's like a whiteboard, but just a little bit more structured. Yeah. Okay. This is another example. I will spend less time here, but using this diagram, we could narrate the key interactions between the key entities for MedScheme. And I'm not spilling any secrets here, because this is sort of standard stuff. A lot of this seeding thoughts for me actually came from Len Silverstein. So what I did was, I didn't know anything about medical administration. But when I went into the workshops, I had a good relationship with the business. We were chatting and having good conversations. And once we talked about it that night, I'll actually go to the universal data model, see how Len Silverstein sort of modeled these things out, put this into Arch, and then play it back to them the next day. And they really appreciated that. It gave me a lot more background in terms of how things should be modeled and work. And it also gave them a sense of, okay, this guy is really trying to understand my business. So it was well, received, and it wasn't based on my own experience at the time. I didn't know anything about that. But what this kind of diagrams help with is just to, again, get the conversation going, to say simple things like, for example, a patient is obviously an important thing, right, in a medical administrator's point of view. But the patient is not really getting any direct benefit necessarily from the administrator. There's other things through which it happens, and we don't have to talk about the technicalities. The point is that the diagram helped us sort out what the main role players are, what kind of actual collaborations happen, the green ones, between parties, and importantly, what contracts or regulations and things like that are relevant. So, for example, for an administration collaboration, so we've got an administrator, we've got a scheme, right? An administrator provides administration to the scheme, and the scheme receives that. But that thing needs to be governed by a contract of sorts. And contract is actually an Archimate type, an object. So you can go here. I'm switching to actual Archi. You can go here, and there's it. That thing is a contract. Can you see that pop up? I'm not sure if you can see the pop up.
Yes,
there's a contract here. Yeah, and so that's the collaboration, business collaboration that I used there. Anyway. All right, so this was also very useful. And again, we're not designing any solutions yet, but what we're definitely getting to is understanding how things should work, understanding which might later turn out to be one-to-many relationships. Where should the relationships lie? What are types of things? So for example, any time that you see embedded objects like this one here, immediately you kind of should go, okay, these are probably types. They can be seen as types. Like a partnership is a type of a healthcare practice and so on. So from a design point of view, your thinking starts to take shape. Yeah? This is still med scheme, and this one is where I said, look, can you see this block here? This is the healthcare provider one, this one here. Okay, that's what we talked about in this one. Okay, it changed over time a little bit. But this diagram gave also context to all the other things we needed to take care of, all other roles that we needed to deal with. You can see it's very, I mean, you can have this in a spreadsheet, or if you're Howard, you probably have this in a Power BI, which is much prettier to look at and click down and draw and filter based on that.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. But Archimede is also just, it gives you, I don't know, I kind of think easier in this space. Okay. Just a quick pause there. Any questions before we sort of hop into the next one?
Yeah, so there is, Paul, there was an interesting set of comments going on between a difference between a solution domain versus a problem domain. What is it that you believe you're modeling at this point in time? Now, there's a definition on the website which says, while the problem domain defines the environment where the solution will come to work, the solution domain defines the abstract environment where the solution is developed. So when you're focusing on this, are you focusing on almost getting a model of the business that is appropriate for the discussion, or what is your guiding?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, I'm gonna hop back to the approach here, right? Because when we do that kind of modeling that I just showed, normally I'm doing that kind of thing in information architecture as a first step. So by the time we get here, we would have discussed quite a few things about the business in these other building blocks. And to be honest, every time we have this engagement, although the framework stays the same or give us direction, it's never 100%, the output is never 100% the same, because there's different things you need to get from it. Now, I like to be quite flexible here and use modeling for the purposes that I need it for. So I'll be going through an example a little bit later where the purpose was just to get a cleaner view on the customer taxonomy, or the way to a proper taxonomy rather, was, that was the one purpose. So what do you do then? Then you model for just understanding the business, in terms of how they think about it. In the case of, for example, MedScheme, we had, they actually they said, look, we understand this process. We want to actually get here because we saw some of the modeling you did, and we want to do that because we are going to re-platform. We know that our current systems force us to do business in the wrong way. It's kind of what they said. It's really remarkable. They were quite mature in their thinking by the time. And so they said, we know the systems, they force us in the wrong direction. We want to think about this right, and we want to think about data right from the start. But so let's rethink how things should work. And this is why these conversations really happened. So whether this is a problem domain or I guess a solution domain, there were a whole bunch of diagrams like this one with specific scenarios and specific things we needed to work through. Like, for example, this one we used to say this is basically how we see the services that they provide in a modeled form. This is something. This is their offerings. So both from a product and a services perspective, this is how it looks like. And this thing describes typically when you actually fall off your bike and break your knee. From that point on until you go through the process, go to the doctor, get diagnosed, there's an outcome, there's funding, and the funders need to come in. This is the whole process of administration. That whole thing is actually described here, and I guess maybe that's the problem domain rather, because you're describing how the world works, not yet how the design of the solution would work. I think that possibly comes later.
Okay.
That's how we'll be currently thinking about it. But I might be wrong, and I mean the point is that you need to get a common understanding, and it takes a bit of modeling even before you know what to actually do, right? And when going through the process of just a deeper and deeper understanding, getting more connection with the people you're working with, whether it's an internal or external customer, you kind of have to feel the way along to say, all right, this is where we're going to, and so this and that model would actually help us getting there and then going for that. I mean, many of these kinds of models, I haven't had the need to create similar ones yet because this was just a situation. Here we needed to figure out how the clinical coding and things like that would work. And there's a bit of a technical, a more data-centric view as well. This is a more business-centric view. You'll see the colors go from yellow here to blue. Whenever you see the blue here, that's an application component. Now, by the way, I do depart from that standard because sometimes you want to highlight a specific thing, and then I sort of just put another color in there. And that's where I break the rules a little bit. So I don't know. And it can be used for high-level things as well. So before you actually get to an ERD, what you're looking at now, let me just get it a bit bigger, this is a bit more technical view of how our data solution looked like. So we used EBX in that project, and EBX has the concepts of a repository and some data spaces inside the repository, and then data sets within the space. And so we just use Archimate to lay it out. Okay, what is in our solution from a technical, semi-technical point of view, I guess. What is in it? We're not looking at tables and fields. I just want to know, business language-wise, what is in this thing? Well, it's provide a reference data. Okay, that's something that the business actually understands. Or scope of practice. Now, you'll see some of the words are underlined here. If your tool is if your tool can handle it, this is also where you can build up your business glossary as you go along, which is really great. This particular one is the diagram you're looking at is visual paradigm. It's very easy to just right-click on a word and add it to your glossary. Simon can maybe make a comment on how that would work in Urban, but I'm sure it's similar. All right. So, okay, so we need to get to the actual data modeling part, right?
Howard, did you want to share your picture?
No, Drew, I just thought it would be an interesting map of that translation from problem to solution. And then interesting that they refer to the architectural design at a solution level, but I do believe that it's that EA thing is right from the business all the way down.
Yeah, I mean, this looks interesting. We should actually delve into that, even maybe prepare a presentation on it. It looks cool.
Yeah.
I think it definitely warrants more chat. That looks great. Okay, I'll be switching to actual tooling soon. But before I get there, what I just wanted to show you guys is what you're looking at is an Archimate diagram, right? Where a few rules are being broken, especially around the colors. It was developed by my team and myself as well. And this was, ST was on that team in this particular model. And we took a few rounds of discussions with the business, maybe 2 or 3. And we got to a point where they were saying a lot of things, and because, I mean, from our perspective, the business also thinks often, maybe it's for you guys as well, often the business don't think in pure business terms. They are influenced by what systems are being implemented. Right? You can't really talk about customers unless they think about CRM, or you can't talk to salespeople about customers and needs without, in their heads, they would have product offerings in mind, you know, and how customers are, let's say, what's the word I'm looking for? How they're described, like, for example, what industry they belong to, what sector, and things like that. And to get that out of everybody's minds and getting it onto a page so we all can understand what they say and then just converse in a meaningful way, we kind of drew a diagram like this. Now, every time we look at this one, and I'll show you the logical model, we still find, oh, there's things that we miss, and this can be expanded and whatnot. So these models are always live things, and they need to be versioned like any good, you know, thoughts develop. And inside of our team, we just call this a CAM, a conceptual Archimate model, because I really actually don't know what to call these things. Howard and I had a discussion. I mean, maybe it's a subject area model, but if you look at subject area models in, for example, Hoberman's books and so on, it doesn't look like this. So I'm not sure what these are. So I just call them CAMs. And if you do have another suggestion, I'll happily take it. But this is how we abbreviate it. And what we did here was just, we wanted to get, the business called this a customer taxonomy. Now, if you want to be technical, a taxonomy is much more than this. But for the functional purpose that we use it for, it's just what are the main, you know, what's the vocabulary that we use when we talk about a customer for us? Well, there's a customer and they live in region, or they operate in regions and things like that. Now, let me switch to the actual model. And just so I can zoom in and out of it. So just a few things to note. Archimate doesn't allow you to have things like attributes and properties, as I've mentioned. So, but we sometimes need to know what a thing means, right? So we've got an opportunity thing here. I used an event object on the business side. This one here, a business event. Yeah? Because an event is something that has, you know, it takes place in a point in time, and there are certain things around it. Now, could an opportunity concept, just without looking at the details and diagrams, just think about it, an opportunity. Could it be something other than an event? Yes, I think it could. So whatever kind of makes sense to you is it needs to help you narrate your story, right? And maybe there is, maybe it isn't. I chose event in this case. It works fine for me at this point. But for us to now include a bit more detail, you just use a note and you put it inside here. And this is what we did. So remember, the point of this thing is just to tell or share a story or understand a story. And that story is what happens in our organization. Well, we've got customers, and customers are linked with an opportunity. An opportunity is identified by an account manager, and that account manager is associated with a customer, right? And opportunities are associated with solution offerings. And a solution offering can be both a product and a service. So you see, there's different things here. So that's a product, that symbol with a little rectangle here, and this is a service with a round rectangle, so they mean something. The solution offering, I also made a product. I also could have made it a service. There's no such thing as an offering in Archimate, so you have to kind of pick one. But it's fairly easy for me to just look at these three things, this one here, customer, opportunity, and solution offering, and understand pretty quickly, kind of how things tie together. Now, just pause there. I'm going to switch to the data model. This is a logical data model that comes off of that CAN. Let me just see. And we've got the opportunity here with all its fields, and this is a work in progress. So this is not a complete diagram. And my team did one as well. And so, but I can look at customer here, and I can look at opportunity, I can look at solution component. And okay, if I know a little bit about how this works, I mean, it's not rocket science. Customer presents, how would this be read? If you use the kind of Steve Hopperman way, you would say each opportunity is presented to one and only one customer, and each customer may be presented with more than one opportunity. Okay, so that's the narration that you pick up from Hopperman's style, and that's also what we promote and teach. And by the way, we've also we made sure that there's always verbs on the lines, right? Anyway, but you kind of have to look a little bit longer to see, okay, well, what is a solution component? A solution component is, just looking at those fields, I can't actually I don't know. I don't know does it contain a product and a service or whatnot, but it's fairly easy to just look at this diagram and see it. Right? So it's things like that where a logical model, there's always a succession when we talk about the different kind of models, right? From a specific data models. The conceptual model is the high-level blocks. You still have cardinality and relationship and those things in there, but they don't have fields typically, or properties, or attributes, and they should express the business needs or how the business works. And then your logical model is the transitioning period. You go from the refinement and definition of requirements to the actual solution design. Both those things can happen on the logical level. And then physical is actually where you take the technology into account. You'll perhaps design differently if you use an Oracle target database as opposed to a SQL or a graph database instead of Teradata or whatever the case might be, right? But the important thing is that you have the business communication under control. All right, so another example is a customer is contactable by this thing. All right, so what we said is they're contactable by a contact point, and a contact point can be a phone or an address or an electronic contact point. And a phone can be subtyped into fixed and mobile and street and box. And you'll see we don't have things like work and home address. Sorry, we don't have things like home and work telephone numbers there because we are rather interested in what kind of a thing it is. Is it a fixed line or a mobile? And then you can say, well, it's for work or for home or whatnot. So anyway, if you take that and you design that into a logical model, there's quite a few more tables to get that right. All right, so what the logical model has, so what I've done is just the green things are party entities, just to kind of highlight a few things, and all the blue things are lookup lists, so ignore them for the moment. And all the other things are sort of just supporting entities. Okay, so I'm going to stop soon because of time, but you'll see that to describe that customers are associated with various kinds of contact points, the way we've abstracted and designed this table here, you have to go from customer. There's an organization party that's involved. There's an affiliation involved, and we can talk about that, how we think about that. And then there's phone and electronic, and there's lots of things here that's just actually clouding the conversation. It's not very important when you speak to a business. This is important when you speak to business. It's like, okay, let's keep it simple. The technicalities aside, conceptually, do you agree that we sort of look at contact points this way? And maybe one last example is to say, all right, look, yeah, actually, let's use this one. So we said that customers services a sector, and then it's subtyped by industry. So the sector is, I guess, the financial sector, infrastructure sector, manufacturing sector, and then inside of that, there's a smaller denomination, right? So finance could be banking or insurance, as an example. Now you see here, none of these things are exhaustive. It's just, they're purely there to make a discussion easier. They're purely there to help the narration going. There are many other things in here, but if you say finance and banking, people sort of think, okay, yeah, that's what it means. Now, actually, when I looked at this for this meeting and I put this into the slide deck, I noticed that our logical model has a mistake somewhere, because the customer services, according to this model, the customer services an industry, and the industry is classified by a sector list. Now I'm going to switch back. Is this right? It doesn't quite seem right, right? Because customer services a sector here, and then an industry. And so there's two things wrong here. The order is wrong, but what's also wrong is there's no list that allows me to select from a list here for industry, only for sector. See that? All right, so what's the point on this? So you have to use the models for what they are, which is helping you understand conceptually how things work, and then measure it against how you design for things. And there are certain ways in which you can just conceptually keep them in sync. The greens are party concepts here, and the greens are party concepts here, maybe. So that's what we tried to do. I've actually added that today because we had a different coloring scheme, I realized. And it's because different teams work in this thing. So ST and I mostly work on this, and then ST also, and some of my other team members, I don't know if they're on here, and Ashley, Nati, they worked on this thing, and it's a normal dialogue to have between these two things, the conceptual and the logical, and you play it off against each other. Yeah, so just a few caveats. Obviously, like any models, they need to be kept updated. So there's definitely things in here when we did the logical design that we realized, okay, it actually doesn't quite work that way. We also got data from the business, and the business doesn't quite conform to the model, so we need to change it. That needs to be changed manually on the conceptual side, and that's just a matter of discipline. And I'll open up for questions, but I just want to end with here is just, again, the ArchiMate tool. So ArchiMate.com, this one here, ArchiMate.com, this one. This is a free and open source modeling tool that's maintained by the Open Group. Well, it's an open source project, but I imagine they're the sponsors. And so most of the modeling tools that you buy, the more professional ones, like Irwin would be, or that we also use Visual Paradigm, because Archimate is an enterprise level language, typically it's only available in the highest or the most expensive layers. That's certainly the case for Visual Paradigm. So your trade-off is either you have to buy one or two of those licenses and do it and make sure your models are all nicely in, your diagrams are all nicely into one model, which is what we managed to do in some cases. So your logical and conceptual models are on the same, actual repository as the Archimate. But we've also had to use Archimate, the open source version, and then keep that separate from the design. So we have two models that you work with, two repositories and tool sets that you work with. From a funding perspective, that just makes more sense. Or if you need to share the stuff with your customer, you have to do it in such a way that they don't procure additional costs, additional tools just for reading your models. So Archimate is one. Visual Paradigm is also one. It's got very nice coverage for that. And then Erwin too definitely covers it. And Simon, you're welcome to chip in and chat a little bit about that. And I haven't left a lot of time for questions. I hope we can spare a few more extra minutes to chat. But that's all I wanted to share with you today. So happy to open it up for chat.
Okay, so Paul, we've got one question there and a comment from Robert. So the question from Andrew is, does Archimate resolve into relational databases only, or can you use it with unstructured data?
Archimate will not resolve into any database. You can't forward engineer it into anything that's executable. Just because it's a conceptual language, it doesn't go to the level of entity and properties and so on. So that's why you have to go into conceptual, logical, physical modeling, in tools like Erwin and so on. Those things can resolve into databases. So Archimate wouldn't. Yeah. Oh, it's a pity. I see Simon needs to move. So Simon is actually, he runs a consultancy for Erwin. They also resell Erwin. So Erwin's a great tool, but unfortunately we needed to step out. Cool, Andrew. Yeah. So maybe you guys can share. I mean, are there other ways where you use modeling to make conversations easier with business, or do you keep models away from them? What typically happens out there? Oh, I've got the wrong Simon in mind. Simon Bloomer. I'm thinking about Simon. Oh, sorry, Simon. I do apologize. I'm thinking about another Simon. Anyway.
Paul, I just have a question about, are there any templates that are included in Archimate?
That's a good question. So what Archimate has is, in the specification, is it has this concept of viewpoints. And viewpoints, look, these things that we talked about today are kind of the standard objects. But then you get the viewpoints, and they've got examples here. So for example, I like this layered viewpoint always. What it does is it, let me just see if there's a real life example here. What they have, there must be a picture here. There isn't. Okay, I'll find one now. So for example, what they have is they have standard range in which you can use the different objects to show things. Like for example, the layered one is nice because it shows you, okay, I'm a business. I've got services. I've got business services that I offer, or products that I offer. I've got external stakeholders, which are my customers, for example, or maybe my partners. So they sort of come at the top. And then I've got my services layer, and then my product layer, my service offerings, and they are supported by business processes. And the business process have roles attached to them, and they are fulfilled by parties, and the processes are supported by applications and so on. So it has it gives you standard viewpoints that you can use to describe typical, scenarios in an organization. For example, there's a capability map. I've used some of these things. They're quite useful, but I'm a little bit mystified why they.
Sorry, Paul. If I'm correct, understanding Melissa's question, are there example industry models? So, for example,
Oh, I see.
I get there's viewpoints where you can see all of that, but if you're starting from a blank page, is there something where you can start from?
Not to my knowledge, Howard and Melissa. That's why I look at external reference models like Silverstone's ones or other ones. Teradata has a very good one. Thanks for clarifying that. So, not to my knowledge, when you, for example, when you download Archimate, you just get the tool, and you get, when you start a new, when you start a new project, you basically get something like this. You get a folder structure that looks like this. Literally, it looks like that. And in your views, that's where you create all your own models, right? So, yeah, not to my knowledge.
Any suggestions on how to start?
Yeah.
Sorry, I know it's gone over. I know.
Listen, there are. So I wanted to share with you. For example, I've collected a whole lot, and happy to share what I've got. And there's a website called Lean as well that builds capability models. So there's quite a few of these. Here's one, for example, in healthcare, and things like that. So a lot of work has been done in this area to get not standardized, but example value chains. Another one is APQC, which provides a lot, and there's a lot of McKinsey and KPMG that do that work. So there's pharmaceutical, manufacturing, higher education, and things like that.
Investment.
I'll have a look for you. But
yeah.
I always enjoy finding them. Also, so I hope, Paul, I'm not distracting.
I am sorry.
No. This is useful, so not at all. I know TM Forum also has content that could help. I think that's more for the telco industry.
Okay, thank you.
Lean.org. I think it's lean.org. They do quite an amazing job.
Yeah. I mean, those things are really useful. And as I mentioned, what I just did before is, if I do have access to a reference model, I would look at that and find the corresponding objects in Archimate, and then make use. That's how I did MedScheme. Yeah, but I don't know if any of them. Look, maybe some of the vendors would come out with that. So they often have, for example, in Silverstone, he has his models available in Irwin. But I think that's actually probably more on the conceptual side. I'm not even sure if it'll be Archimate level. I very much doubt that. Yeah, models like that normally comes out they come out in logical, not even conceptual, but often logical model level. There are some cheaper solutions than Irwin. Are you making a statement, John? Again. There are cheaper solutions than Irwin. So again, Archimate is free. Visual Paradigm is generally more affordable than Irwin. But all the Viewpoints cover the language, so there should be something for your budget. The only disadvantage, I really like Archi. It's got features that the others don't have. For example, I really like this visualizer, where you can click on anything here and it generates on the fly it generates a kind of a graph thing to quickly give you all the other objects that's linked to it. Now, okay, it could look messy like this, but it can also give you an idea, you know, there's some inherent value here. It can also make you see problems, like, for example, why do we have circular reference here between party and customer? Is that valid or not? You can go and identify, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but you can always just click on something and see, oh, okay, so customer contact, these are the other things that it links to. And that would transcend this diagram. It would because you often have more than one diagram that makes use of the same objects, and instead of going through all your actual diagrams and see where they fit, you can just click on it here and see, regardless of which view you've created, the links. You can see, okay, in this repository, customer contact has 3 other objects linked to it, and it's an actor, it's an interface, and a role. That makes sense. Yeah, Simon, I agree. Simon, I'm so sorry that I missed it. I'm thinking about, and I can't remember the guy's name. Simon, who works for the company also. Anyway, you'll forgive me. All right. Any other questions, guys? I'm hoping it's helpful. It's been helpful to us, but it's certainly something that's been sort of coming along and built up as we go. And at the end of the day, what you really want is, regardless of what method you use, you just want to make sure you understand the customer's world and you can convey it in a way that makes sense. And then so that when you do go into design, you've asked all the right questions, or at least most of them. If you find that out too late, it's a problem. I can maybe say this as well. We have tried to go from these models because of time and just availability of people. We created diagrams like these for a customer, and then we jumped everything to the solution without going through the logical design. And that was a big mistake. It was a big mistake because although the general concepts were clear, like on a high level, like think, for example, on the Mediclinic side, the high level concepts are fairly clear. But the devil is in the detail, right? So once you actually design and implement solutions, there's all kinds of questions that would have come out in a logical design. But it came out when people are starting to code the solution already. And so it created a lot of pressure on the guys who need to write the solutions. Creates frustration from a communication perspective between the business user and the design and development teams. And I think a logical model would definitely have helped to alleviate that pain.
So, Paul, the question I started early on in terms of, and I suppose my fear is, I do all of this work, I then have to jump over to Visual Paradigm, and how do I keep these two working together? How have you guys done it?
Yeah, that's purely it's purely a process of making sure that as you refine your requirements in the logical side, that you bring that back to the conceptual side out. Unfortunately, the models are so different that there is no way to directly automatically keep them updated. They're on a different level. The language expression is different. Archimate can't deal with cardinality, for example, and things like that. So it's a downside that you can't go back and forth. But at the same time, it kind of keeps you on both ends thinking on the right level. Right? So you want to make sure that if you design something complex, that you still have an abstracted view conceptually that is easily communicatable to the customer. And you don't want to overcomplicate your business models too much, without, of course, without losing the important detail. You still need to know how the business works and how to think about things. And what the terms mean, or all that. But logical design gets very messy very quickly because it deals with all kinds of lookups and lists and resolution tables, many-to-many resolution tables and things like that. So they are quite different in nature. Any more questions? Esti, you guys have worked with me on this. Am I missing anything important? What to convey?
I don't think you're missing anything important. I think almost whenever we don't start with a conceptual Archimate model and we start with the logical model, or we want to kind of save time in a way and not do this, I think then we just find that this is useful. The time you spend, a couple of hours or how long ever on this, is very valuable.
Mm. Yeah, also, that's a good point. Also, when you bring new people on board, you know, I was asked once to, I worked at a customer, I actually helped design the first versions of the solution. I was then sort of pulled back into the project a year or two later, and it has developed in a way that got me lost. And I actually just went back and tried to do an Archimate model again. There wasn't one before, so I looked at the physical implemented solution and abstracted it into Archimate, and that helped me a lot to understand what's going on. But if there was one at the first time, it would have saved me 2 or 3 days worth of work. So, yeah. But I mean, there must be other also easier ways to go from even a conceptual design back into something that's on a business level. I'm interested to know how that works for other people. Yeah, agreeing with Simon there. He says it's something that never gets taught, and it's value completely unappreciated. Yeah. A good comment from Colin. All right, guys. Well, if there are no more questions, you're welcome to contact me or set up a chat or whatever. To share what we know. There's certainly a lot of room for improvement, and it's always good to throw these things out into the open and other people look at it and make obvious remarks that would improve the whole process, and so happy to hear about things like that as well. But I think if there's nothing else, Salad, we can probably end the meeting. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's got to. Hopefully he's still around.
Sorry, I was talking to myself. Sorry. Thanks, Paul. Thanks so much. I was just saying that it was great that everyone was here, and I'll publish the recording on LinkedIn and on Meetup.
Cool.
And Howard, before you go, do you want to mention the data science big data session on the 15th?
Yes. So, guys, we have a really nice opportunity. There's Jean Bernard. Is he around, or is he jumped off? JB?
He was there for a while. I don't know where he's got to now.
Okay. So we are having a talk by one of the guys in, I'll just get his name again because it's Guillermo, somebody that's been confirmed. And the talk is on data science has enabled innovation in so many business areas of business. But how good is data science at improving itself? Can typical decisions of a data scientist be automated? Just like data science automates decisions in other part of the business. Okay, so this talk presents an automated analytics engine and implements probabilistic reason and procedural generation. So that's the one on the 15th of this month. Thanks, guys.
Good one. Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
All right. Pleasure. Keep all, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.